Well, yeah, let's start with like kind of tell me the journey about, creating your podcast and like
Sure.
what you've done over the last 2 years to just kind of continue to build it up.
Okay, amazing. Yeah. So throughout my gymnastics career, particularly towards the end, I started working with the co-producer of my podcast, a guy called Sam Linley, who was a family friend. And he came into the gym one day and he shot some really nice portraits of me. And I said, "Hey, look, Sam, have you ever thought about doing videography and maybe following my journey and documenting a little bit?" So we did that for 3 years and it was brilliant. It was a really cool. Way to tell the story, I think, of an athlete towards the end of their career where maybe things weren't going perfectly and they'd had previous success, but it really showcased just how difficult it was. It was very much like a fly on the wall type documentary. So it wasn't just all the perfect goes that you have in the gym. It was the good days and the bad days through injuries, ups and downs. And people really liked that. It's very authentic. Wasn't a lot of editing in the videos. And then when it came to my retirement, my partner actually, she said, look, you need to try all of these different ideas that you've got because otherwise they'll just be ideas and they'll never turn into anything. So one of the things that I loved doing towards the end of my career was that we tried a few times to do a different kind of podcast or show. I mean, we had a little show where we were in a barber shop. I don't know if it's called a barber shop in the US, but effectively we're like a men's hair salon.
Yeah.
We tried to do interviews in there. We went to some food truck stalls and tried to do interviews there. Nothing quite worked. And we did like a first go of the podcast. We did 5 episodes. They did really well, but it just coincided with kind of the back end of my career and a very difficult time. And we just kind of parted ways a little bit, me and Sam Linley. And then I reapproached him after I'd retired and said, look, I really enjoyed the podcast that we did. I think it's the thing I've enjoyed the most outside of the sport of gymnastics. I'd love to give it a go. I'm about to go traveling for 4 months to South America, but when I get back, can we have a conversation? And he said, yeah, let's do it. So I went traveling, came back, was still motivated to give it a go. I said, look, this is my idea. I'd like to get gymnasts on and guests because nobody's really doing this for men's gymnastics. What do you think? And are you up for it? And he said, yeah, 100% I'm up for it. But I think that you're good enough in front of camera to do 25 episodes by yourself before we bring guests in. And I was like, what? Like, what would I talk about for like 25 episodes? That seems like a lot. It was
Yeah.
very overwhelming. And so for the first 3 episodes, I just told kind of the journey of my story towards the 2012 Olympics, missing out on the Rio Olympics, and then the final chapter of my career. And then after that, I started to delve into different topics. So whether it was leadership, building self-confidence, whether it was specific gymnastics things like how I would prepare my routines or the mental side of sport. And my experiences of my career, I used those and drew upon them to share these stories. And people seem to really like them. And then it wasn't until episode about 25 we brought in the first guest. And I guess since then we've just been building it up over time and been very consistent. We've done 100 and I think we've recorded 136 episodes. So we've released 134 weekly episodes. It's been a real labor of love. It's amazing, man. We've enjoyed it so much. We've had the opportunity to interview some of the biggest names in the sport. From both the men's side and the women's side. We've also had episodes where we've interviewed people from other sports. We have a few kind of experts that we bring in to maybe talk about American gymnastics or gymnastics over in Japan or China. And just recently, last week, we interviewed our first athlete from Asia. So we had Kazuma Kaya on the podcast, which was very exciting. He speaks English. He was the team captain of the Japanese team that won gold last year in Paris. So for us, that was I was like a kid in a candy shop. I was so excited because I'm a massive fan of Japanese gymnastics and also himself. And so that was just, yeah, it was so cool. So that was like a big milestone for the podcast. But yeah, I guess that's the story of how we've been able to, yeah, keep it going. I realized pretty quickly that a lot of the people that listen to our podcast are a lot of the top athletes in the sport. They really enjoy it and get a lot of value from it. So for anybody that's maybe a gymnastics brand or a gymnastics company, it's kind of like targeted advertisement because they're the people you want to kind of talk to and get your products in front of. Because obviously, if you've got a gymnastics club and there's 1,000 members, if the top athletes in the gymnastics club believe in your product or your brand and they use it, then hopefully that's a trickle down effect to all of the kids in there because they want to be like their heroes. So we've been very lucky that we had some really great supporters in Turn Gymnastics, Gymnastic Planet over in the UK, and a couple of others that have come in and out, and they've really helped us, I guess, make it financially viable because it's not an easy thing to start a podcast.
Yeah.
Everybody can do it now, but it's an expensive thing. So yeah, that's been very cool and has enabled us to carry on for this long.
Well, I think you just gave me one of my answers, but I obviously gotten to do a bunch of cool interviews through it. So who are your like top three interviews you conducted with this podcast?
Yeah, that's a brilliant question, me, and they're probably different interviews for different reasons. But I think yeah, interviewing Lewis Smith was a really interesting one. He's a teammate of mine. Obviously, know his story closely. I have a real advantage when I interview teammates because I have somewhat of a selective memory. So my memory is like an elephant. I never forget anything. So I already kind of know the questions to ask.
Yeah.
But I think the one with Lewis was really interesting because, he's now been retired since 2016. So it was very reflective, and his the way that he kind of looks back on his career and his take now on a lot of the big moments in his career was really, really interesting. I learned things myself. Lewis was somebody that had ADHD as an athlete and was aware of it. And so for me, it was really, really interesting to listen to his take on that and the influence that had on his career. Then also talk about some of the big moments, the highs and the lows. That was a really, really interesting conversation. I had a conversation recently with a German gymnast called Sarah Vossi. That was amazing because I didn't know her story. So she was so well spoken, and to learn her story of how unwell she was, and nobody knew what was going on. She was in hospital on antibiotics for 4 weeks, and within literally less than 2 months, she competed at an Olympic all-around final in Paris last year. I was like, oh my God, this is the most amazing story ever. It was incredible. For me personally, having the opportunity to fly out to Germany and film with one of my idols, Fabian Hambüchen, was
Yeah.
just they say don't meet your idols because they'll disappoint you, but that has not been my experience. When I've met the best of the best, so the guys that are right at the top, whether it's Fabian or Reese McClenaghan, the current pommel horse Olympic champion, they have given me so much of their time. I've been absolutely blown away by it. And their professionalism, organization, just their willingness to be open and authentic and share I guess, their secrets. I mean, that's what obviously makes him the best. And I think to have that opportunity to sit there with Fabian in his own gym with his dad there, listen to his story, and have the chance to swing on a high bar. I remember being an 11-year-old kid watching the Athens Olympics, and there used to be a magazine in the UK called the Gymnast magazine, and there was a picture of Fabian doing a ginger on it, and I drew the picture as a kid. Like he was like my hero when I was 11 and I first watched the Olympic Games. So to have had the opportunity to like be there with him, and we're friends. I competed with him as well, but it was a real pinch me moment that I probably never had before. So that was very, very special. Obviously, really big to interview the first athlete that's based out in Asia, Kazuma Kaya. That was really, really cool, and credit to him as well. English is not his first language, and he did incredibly well. Yeah, so because obviously English is his second language. What you did get, which was really, really cool, was just the most important parts of what he was trying to get across. And the Japanese system is somewhat of a mystery, right? We don't know a lot about it. It was very, very interesting to hear about, in Japan, when you're effectively what would be primary school or, I guess, the early years in America, if you're at school in America, before you go to high school. He said they just focus on basics and handstand position. That's it. And it's very much coach led. As soon as you get to high school, it flips, it becomes athlete led. And it's all about autonomy and it's making your own decisions. And I found that so interesting. He said, like coaches in the gym, particularly when you're at university, they barely say anything or give you any coaching tips or advice. And if they do, it's just the most important details. He actually said that in the team final last year in Paris, it came around to that last rotation when the Chinese gymnast fell twice on the high bar. It was actually Kazuma Kaya who went to the head coach and said, look, I think Hashimoto should do this routine. What's that start value? And he went, I was thinking the same thing. Let's work that out. And they made the decision themselves. That blew me away. Like in an Olympic final for an Olympic gold medal, you've got the athletes and the team captain kind of deciding what routine they're going to do.
Yeah.
That was just incredible to hear that. So yeah, that was an amazing conversation as well, mate. So I absolutely loved that one.
Yeah, well, I've kind of had the opportunity over the last couple months to talk to a lot of the guys who are like big in social media, Felix Dolce, Fred,
Nice.
Cameron Nelson, and they all kind of have like a similar goal of trying to get more people engaged in the sport, grow the sport, especially on the men's side. And they're all using social media to do that. And obviously, you're doing that as well with your podcast. So, kind of tell me, what do you think is a good way to make the sport more appealing and more engaging to maybe like a casual viewer, getting like more fans into it? And, what do you think about kind of like the rise in social media and gymnastics?
Well, yeah, it's a very interesting concept, mate. And I think for me, I sit in a really unique position of every week having athletes that are still competing in the sport at a very high level coming in. And the one thing that's kind of disappointing for me is that most of them are saying, hey, look, I've got to the top level. I'm winning medals for my nation, my country. I thought all the sponsors were going to come in and all of a sudden I was going to be able to financially support myself and my career. And the reality is that it's just not that easy. I had Luke Whitehouse in recently. He's won three back-to-back European gold medals on the floor, which is an incredible achievement. And I said to him, Luke, are you surprised at how consistently you have to win medals just to even get close to having conversations with some of these brands so that you can make enough money to make a real career so that when you retire, it can set you up for life after gymnastics? And he was like, yeah, like I'm baffled. I thought I'd win one medal and get to the very top. And then all of a sudden, I've had these big brands like Adidas and whoever it might be coming in and supporting the journey, but it's just so difficult. And I think for the sport of gymnastics, what's really, really hard is that number one, I think the format of the competitions, they're very long, right? Like they're long. But the biggest thing is you just don't get to follow the characters' journeys because you get to watch them a couple of times a year on TV. If you're in the UK, right, we don't have a college system like you do in the US. So the only opportunities the fans have to watch gymnastics are in April at the European Championships and in October at the World Championships. It's just not enough. You need to buy into somebody's journey to follow along with it. And, that narrative of like the ups and the downs, like that's what you want. And when you've got a sport like soccer in Europe and then American football, every week you've got a league match every week. You get to know the players and you buy in, you've got your team, and that's very difficult to do in a sport like gymnastics in the traditional format. So I think that's a big problem, and it's a big part why I'm trying to do my part in building the sport of men's gymnastics. And I think we do have an opportunity to do that right now. And the reason I say that is that I think gymnastics had a real moment in Paris. Um, I think the fact that Simone is who she is and all the celebrities that brought into watching the gymnastics, it brought a lot of media attention. And then the American men winning the bronze medal in the way that they won the bronze medal with Stephen going viral, all of a sudden people are starting to pay attention to men's gymnastics. And gymnastics is such a unique sport because it's one of the only sports where the women get the lion's share of everything. They get the most money, they get the most eyeballs, it's the most people taking part in the sport, and the men are kind of second to that. And I think we could really ride on the coattails of women's gymnastics and hopefully bring some of those fans from the women's side of the sport into the men's. And that's what I'm hearing. I have people comment on some of our podcasts and some of our social media content saying, hey, I followed women's gymnastics for a long time, but I'm starting to get into the men's. This is great. There needs to be more content out there. And I'm hoping that over the next few years, maybe there can be some key characters in different parts of the sport, whether that's me with my podcast, whether it's Frederick Richard over in the US doing the incredible job that he's doing to grow the sport there. You've got Niall Wilson in the UK, Felix Dolce, another amazing advocate for the sport, role model, somebody that's really trying to push to grow the sport over in Canada. And again, he was a brilliant conversation when we had the conversation with him. I think if we could have like five or six people just trying to nudge it in the right direction, and then maybe have a situation where those minds come together and we go, all right, okay. There's people love gymnastics when it's at the Olympic Games. It's the first sport that sells out, right? But we
Yeah.
need to capture that somehow. And I'm trying to do something over here in the UK. I'm trying to figure something out. Me and a few of my old teammates at the moment, we're training to do a small exhibition competition next year. So the idea is that we're going to test out a little format, a 10-0 format. Because I think the biggest mistake gymnastics ever made was getting rid of the perfect 10. It was just absolutely stupid
Yeah.
because that's our unique selling point. If you see just a normal guy at a bar or a pub and they jump off a bench or something, they'll go, "Hey, perfect 10." Like that's what people know gymnastics for. And so to lose that was just, it was crazy. So I think I'm working on a little format to incorporate the perfect 10, you do less skills, maybe use those guys that are retired and they're just transitioning to life out of gymnastics, but they're still at a super high level. It's just that at the moment you either train 30 hours a week and compete at the Olympics or you do nothing. There's like no in
Yeah.
between. So maybe if we can create some kind of format, some kind of league format that is separate to the Olympic format, it's not instead of, and maybe we can then bring a fan base in through that way, and then they go into the sport through the traditional format. That's kind of like my idea at the minute. I'm playing around with it. I have a good idea for a format for a new gymnastics competition that would work well on like TV. I came up with it on a beach in Mexico while I was traveling. I was part of the Pro Gymnastics Challenge that took place in 2013. I was part of the Superstars of Gymnastics in the UK where they gave it a go, but it didn't quite work because you need the right balance of gymnastics people and business people to make that work. It needs to be a symbiotic relationship, and it was either one or the other. So I think, yeah, I know the right people. I'm building this network of contacts up through doing the podcast, right? And it would be cool if we could grow it that way. But they're my thoughts, really, mate. We need to get gymnastics in front of people as much as possible. You guys have an opportunity to do that a little bit more in the US with the college system, and hopefully that grows and gets bigger and bigger. And that fan base you have there on the women's side can translate to the men's, particularly in the lead up to LA, right? Like
Right.
you've got a real moment over there in the US. And the great thing is that you've got so much depth at the minute in the gymnastics in the US. It's quite scary, actually. I'm like, whoa, these
Yeah.
guys. It's going to be very, very difficult for GB to kind of challenge. And you bring Russia back into that mix, maybe in some capacity over the next 4 years. It's going to make it very, very exciting for LA. And yeah, I mean, yeah, they're kind of my thoughts on that, mate. I think it's that. I think the appetite for it is there. It's just capturing it in the right way. And maybe you need just the right people coming together and working on it. And maybe that happens individually, somewhat isolated, and slowly but surely everybody kind of congregates together towards that LA Olympics time and we kind of make it happen, you know?
Yeah, you definitely bring up an interesting point with like the 10-0 system because I know from like watching college gymnastics with my family and then like a couple weeks later watching an elite meet, it's so much easier for them to grasp like, oh, she got a 9-9. That's a great score versus like they'll see like 13-5 and I'll be like, oh, that's pretty good. And they'll be like, I'm not really understanding anything. So like I feel like watching the Olympics with people who didn't don't have like that gymnastics knowledge was like a lot of explaining versus when you're
Yeah.
watching in the NCAA meet, it's so easy because they know perfect 10, oh, that's a great score. So I think that's a great point. And I think another thing I've heard from a lot of the athletes is, doing more of the women's and men's events together,
Yeah.
stuff like the Swiss Cup, back when we had the American Cup. And now I think with the mixed team competition, what do you think about more of those and doing that mixed team up until LA too?
Yeah, I think it's a great idea, right? I like the introduction of it. I competed in the Swiss Cup myself. I think what's interesting again there, very unique, is right, the men are using the women's fan base there to try and build their own. But I think it's a great way of introducing fans of women's gymnastics to the sport of men's gymnastics. And if they get to know those athletes through that, what an amazing thing to do. So I think it's very smart. That is a really good change in direction that the FIG have done. There are some times where I can be quite critical of the FIG and often wonder, like, who is it sitting around making these decisions? That seems nonsensical, but I think they are trying. They're trying hard to grow the sport, speed things up. I do like the format of I do like the format now of the team final, having the athlete go head to head. Because for a fan, you can go, well, he did a clean routine, but he fell off, so that's a better score. And then they can kind of work out the score when they see them come up. So I do like that. Trying to make it faster. Obviously, having the free up, free to count is great because there's that jeopardy. Or
Yeah.
if they fall off, oh, every score's got to count. So that works really well. But trying to, yeah, make the competition shorter, faster pace. I think that's better for the athletes as well, right? Because to concentrate for 3 hours is so difficult.
Yeah.
To be at that peak level of, I guess, mental preparation from minute one to minute what would that be? 180 if you're going
Yeah.
to do a high bar routine. That is so stressful. So to condense that is a great idea. And if you can have more meets where men and women are competing together, amazing. I think the challenge they have is that like, and this challenge spreads across all sport. It's so hard now to get somebody to host an Olympic Games. We're having this with the Commonwealth Games, right? Like nobody wants to host it because it's so expensive to host a major sporting event.
Yeah.
Very difficult to find an arena that could have both men's and women's in the same arena. So that is maybe something that's a little bit difficult. And maybe they have to play around with the apparatus that work and don't work a little bit more. I think with the women's, there was a lot of comments after the European Championships. We want to see bars. Why didn't we see bars in that
Yeah.
format? Like it was effectively free leg apparatus. Come on, let put bars is, for me watching the Paris Olympic Games, uh, you know, somebody that's maybe at times in the past found the women's side of the sport because the US are so dominant, it's not as competitive, and the level sometimes, particularly on apparatus like vault, is just not it's not as competitive as the men's say team final. But I actually watched uh, Neymar's bars routine,
Mhm.
Kalia Neymar's bar
Yeah.
routine, and that was the most exciting routine I watched the whole Olympic Games. I was like, "This is unbelievable, man! This is the coolest routine I've ever seen." And for somebody watching that's not from a gymnastics background, my fiance, she was like, "It's the best piece of gymnastics I've ever seen." I was like, "That was actually incredible. That was so good." So yeah, being able to see routines like that alongside the men's would be really cool. So I think again, mate, likewise, you bring up a great point. I think mixing those is going to be very key. And the more that the FIG and the Olympic, the IOC can do that for LA
Yeah.
to really harness that huge fan base in America, women's gymnastics, that would be a very smart thing. And I think men's gymnastics will benefit massively from that.
No, I don't know if you've seen the draw yet for the all-around final at Worlds this year, but did you see that they're doing just the top four? Like people are rotating in groups of four. Like, do you think that's gonna keep the meet too fast, or do you think you'll,
Oh, interesting, right?
yeah, because they'll have all,
I haven't actually seen that, Maze. That's very interesting. So is it going to be rotations of four on each six events?
yeah, so all six will go at the same time.
I like that though, because sometimes the issue with an all-around competition is that you have two apparatus that aren't being used, right? And people kind of can, I think the atmosphere sometimes in an all-around competition can, you feel that the team event you don't because every apparatus is being used and you go in there and again I said like that jeopardy. I quite like that. It'll be very interesting. It'll be interesting to hear from the athletes afterwards. That is something that they maybe need to train for in an all-around setting. My first reaction is that is going to be fast paced and you need to be ready because that means that you're probably going to go first on, let's say you're the first guy up on floor. You'll go first, second, third, fourth, back to first again.
Yeah.
So you have to go first more than once in a competition, which is quite rare. Normally, unless it's a team final and your team's putting you up first, when you are that guy that's going first, that really impacts the warm-up that you do. So I think maybe some strategy is going to come into play there. I think that's what's great about the mixed team event. I think for the first time, you're having men's and women's coaches and gymnasts having to collaborate and go, like what apparatus do we pick here and what's the right strategy? Oh, that's very cool. That'll be really interesting to see how that plays out, mate. It's going to speed that competition up for sure.
Yeah.
Be interested to see how quick that competition is. Typically an all-around competition, I'd say would be what, 2.5 hours. If you're
Yeah.
starting to get to between 1.5 hours, that's pretty quick. And yeah, it could be exciting. And then you can have the men's and the women's back to back, maybe in the future,
Yeah.
or even back to back, maybe, and the same fans stay in the arena for the whole thing. That's quite an exciting look. Clearly, the FIG are thinking about it, and they've
Yeah.
got people that are trying to improve and move with the times. And yeah, that's really, really cool. I don't know whether they can relook at maybe the World Cup circuit again and bring something in.
Mhm.
Maybe if there was like a team element to that. I've often thought, and look, maybe here I'm giving away a great idea and I'll live to regret this, but I've often thought that it'd be really cool. Obviously, in Europe, we have the Champions League in soccer, right? And
Yeah.
so you take the best teams from every single league. I've often thought, wow, imagine if you could take the German Bundesliga champions, the French league champions, the NCAA champions, the Japanese university champions, the British champions in the UK, and then there's like a team
Hmm.
championships, the best team, because that would increase the level in all of those leagues as well.
Yeah.
And that would be a very exciting competition. So yeah, maybe that's something that anybody's out there with a little bit of money and wants to talk to me, please let me know. But I've always thought that'd be so cool, just as a gymnastics fan, to see that the best club team
Yeah.
in every country compete in a team competition because there are so few gymnastics competitions. You could fit that into the calendar, maybe at the end of the year, just before Christmas or something.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, oh, that's very cool, mate. Yeah, it's great to hear about that.
Well, upcoming World Championships, it's coming up soon. How have you kind of kept up with the GB team? What are you thinking about their chances and just kind of how they've been over the Paris quad and now moving into LA?
Yeah, very interesting, mate. Very much a strategic approach for this World Championships. They're sending no all-rounders. From what I understand, they're just going after individual medals, and that's maybe been true of the past. Certainly, the Olympic Games in Paris, that was the approach. For me, it was certainly okay. We'll pick the best individuals that have the best chance of winning medals, and then as a byproduct, hopefully the team will be very strong. And if we're in the position to challenge for a medal, then great. I think the interesting thing about this Olympic cycle is that we have a lot of depth,
Hmm.
almost too much depth. And I spoke to the head coach of the national team. I went to watch the Worlds trial, and on the way back, I stopped at what would be like a gas station, but a service station here in the UK. Bumped into him, and he went, "Hey, Sam, what did you think?" And I said, "My first reaction was there are too many guys at the high level. What are you going to do with all of those gymnasts and how are you going to keep them happy?" And he was like, "I've been trying to send them all out to World Cup events this year, so everybody has at least one competition. But next year, that's going to be a big problem. And a lot of those gymnasts are going to have to be cut from the team, and they're just not going to make it." And I think the interesting thing in the UK at the moment is we have four junior guys that are 17 or 18 that can still compete at the Junior European Championships next year, and they are unbelievable. Their level is so high. So you're going to then bring four more into that depth. And we're looking at like between 20 and 25 guys that are of a really high level. So, I mean, it's a great problem to have as a GB national coaches, right? And what that might do is that might translate into the team becoming more of a significant factor in selecting the Olympic team in LA as we get there. You might find that with those younger guys coming through, they're just so good that now we are looking at challenging for an Olympic medal, which would be really exciting. I think for this Worlds in particular, the focus is on those individual apparatus. And right now, we're so top heavy on floor, vault, and also rings, right? Which is traditionally, we've always been very good on floor. Um, Probably quite well known for that. And if I would say after pommel horse, our second best event has always probably been floor. We've been a team that's been very strong on that apparatus, and we can always put up three guys that are going to get you a high level score. But now we've got three guys that are like three of the best in the world on floor.
Yeah.
So they're competing just to get into a final, you know. They want to be the best of the three British guys, which is amazing. And similarly on vault, you know, Harry Hepworth and Jake Jarman are the standouts on vault, but you still have Luke Whitehouse pushing that a little bit. His main focus will be floor. This year, he's not put a foot wrong, right? He's European champion, managed to go out and test himself at the World University Games against a real strong field again, and took the gold medal there. He's the British champion, so he's looking at that worlds, and there's no doubt that, yeah, he's not got a world medal, but I think knowing him now and having had that conversation with him on the podcast, he's going to go for that gold medal. But in terms of the difficulty, Harry Hepworth and Jake Jarman are right up there with him. So it's going to be about who can basically survive the qualification and
Yeah.
land on their feet, and who gets the least amount of deductions, basically, because those three gymnasts have like the highest difficulty in the world. I know you have Cameron Nelson now that's topped that with his two triple backs, but yeah, world beaters on that apparatus. When it comes to pommel horse, again, it's the apparatus where there's been a real drop off, and that's where the US is really taking advantage. And right now, I mean, you guys in the US, you have like the depth on pommel horse globally at the moment is huge, but the depth you guys have in the US is to be honest, it's flabbergasting because traditionally in my generation, that would be your weakness, right? And your Achilles
Yeah.
heel. And that's where we would take like huge advantage of you guys and we would put up Max Whitlock, Lewis Smith, and Daniel Keatings, and we'd gain like 2, 3, 4 marks. You just can't do that anymore and kind of switched a little bit. And like now you guys have got incredible depth on pommel horse. That's what's cool about the sport of gymnastics. It comes in different waves, right? So on pommel horse, though, we do have a new young guy. His name's Alex Cash. He trains at Nottingham, which is where I live and the gym that I'm from, and he really suits that new pommel horse worker that is taller, slender, long lines, is very good at sewn elements, travel elements. He has a beautiful long line, did well in Paris, so he's going to be there. For him, it's his first World Championships. He's still a teenager, so for him to try and push for that final would be brilliant. I think in terms of his difficulty and execution, he has that potential. When it comes to rings, you've got Harry Hepworth and Courtney Tulloch. Those two guys have been battling out, and I think Courtney really played the advantage of Courtney being a gymnast that spent his whole life at 10 skills and then dropping to 8 really played out in the first half of this year. And he was able to then put that triple back in very quickly. And then all of a sudden, after the British Championships, where Courtney effectively beat Harry purely on difficulty, and Harry had a higher execution. The next week, Harry was already working on triple back because that is effectively, every rings worker now is going to have to do that big dismount. So that triple back of Harry's looks consistent. It looks very clean. I think his ring strength, it has been brilliant. He just has suffered from not having that start value. So it's going to be really exciting to see how Harry maybe stacks up on rings. He is somebody, by the way, that at every major championship, that guy knocks it out the park and he qualifies for like 2 or 3 of the finals he goes for. He's like I describe him as the British Dennis Ablazin,
Mhm.
who used to always like qualify for 2 or 3 finals and has medaled at the Olympics on like 3 different events. Harry is like on those 3 events, he's incredible. Comes to vault, Jake Jarman, an absolute world beater. That 3.5 that he does it so clean. It's bang down the middle. He puts it on its feet. It's very difficult for anybody to beat him. Harry is going to go for it. I think at the moment, Harry in the gym is working on a pike dragulesco and a handspring triple twist. So even if he just pulls out one of those vaults, I think it will be very, very competitive. And I think we'll get to the point where just having a dragulescu and a handspring 2.5 is no longer good enough to win, even if you stick those vaults, because I think Jake Jarman, Harry Hepworth, and obviously a few others are going to really push that difficulty. And I think the standard by the time we get to LA is going to be that you're doing a 3.5 or a pike dragulescu effectively. So yeah, I think that's the biggest chance for GB, I think, is vault. Obviously floor, but floor is more risky, right? But if we can get 2 of those guys in the final, statistically speaking, right, we're going to then have, you know, what is that? Upwards of 25% of the final are going to be from Great Britain. There's a good chance there we'll win a medal. Comes to parallel bars, we've got Joe Fraser, who's on an incredible run and a comeback at the moment, did very, very well in Paris. This is probably the last chapter of his career, potentially. And don't take my word for that. You'd have to ask Joe. I'm sure he'd like to continue for 2032 too. But I've been so impressed with his gymnastics, like super high level. And I kind of forgot that he finished 5th in Paris all around, right? And if one of those big guys had made a mistake on bar, he probably would have won an Olympic medal. So he is right up there, and his routines, man, and the difficulty that he's doing is so exciting. And I think he's probably a global all-around medal away from maybe being the best all-around gymnast we've ever produced in the UK. So that's going to be exciting to see what Joe does at the Worlds. He's a former world champion on parallel bars. So yeah, you can't count him out on that apparatus. And then when it comes to high bar, probably an event that we're weak on at the moment, if I'm honest. And we've got 1 or 2 guys that can go up and do a good bar routine, mainly Joe Fraser, but underneath that, we're quite far behind everybody. And that's where we really need to start like picking up on. And I think we'll do that. But it just comes down to, yeah, a bit more difficulty, people pushing that a little bit more. I like the strategy that you guys have gone for in the US in the last 2 cycles, really pushing that difficulty. I was told that you can effectively almost qualify now for having a certain level of difficulty. That's part of your selection process. And one thing that's very interesting is that the British have now adopted that. So there is a way in which you could qualify with just hitting a difficulty score. So you're obviously doing something right over there in the US because we're copying what you're doing over here in the UK. But yeah, that's the way I would set it up, mate. I mean, I would like to expect from that team, I think a successful championships would probably be, you know, 4 or 5 finals, 2 or 3 medals. And there's no reason why those guys can't go out there and particularly on floor and vault, challenge for a gold medal. So yeah, that's the way I see the GB team at the moment. I'm somebody that personally struggled with my mental health towards the end of my career. Um, and it was very, very challenging. And I think in the sport of gymnastics, what's interesting is that I think we attract a lot of kids that are those kids that struggle at school, right? Maybe struggle academically. They may be neurodiverse, like myself, might have ADHD, obsessive compulsive personality disorder. And that's a double-edged sword. Those things and the way that my brain works really lends itself to the sport of gymnastics very well. There's a lot of structure, discipline, routine, repetition.
Yeah.
But also, that can be a real challenge. And I found that when I retired from the sport of gymnastics, and there's not a lot of help for those athletes that transition into life afterwards. I think the difficulty is that, on the men's side and the women's side, particularly the women's side, is that it's a very unique way of life being an elite athlete. And gymnastics is a very unique sport. You're often asked to do 5, 6, 7 hours of training, 5, 6, 7 days a week from a very young age. And that's what's unique about it. You might train like that in other sports, and you might train like that. And I know that there are a lot of young swimmers that are trying to get pool time at 5 in the morning. But typically that starts a little bit later on as you've developed already and you're already becoming maybe a teenager and a young adult. But in gymnastics, that can start at 7, 8, 9 years of age when your brain is still not developed. You don't know who you are yet. And I think we need to really factor that in. And I think there needs to be a lot more aftercare by the federations when athletes are transitioning out of the sport. And this is one thing that I'm quite passionate about at the moment. We're going to have a conversation soon with one of my former teammates, world medalist, Commonwealth medalist, European champion, Daniel Keaton's incredible gymnast. He's now suffering with back issues from his career. He's suffering with his liver from taking painkillers. Me personally, I've suffered with my mental health. I have a shoulder that is completely broken in 3 places and needs surgery and fixing. Other athletes that were on painkillers for long periods of time. Uh, at no point throughout of our careers were we given any financial advice. None of us have a pension. And all
Yeah.
of a sudden, you retire at the age of 25 to 30, and you come out into normal life, and you're just kind of expected to just adjust and fit in. So difficult, it's so challenging, it's very isolating. All of a sudden, after you retire, you lose your community of people that understand you and you understand them because you both have the context of each other's life. That community's gone. The mentor you had, which would quite often be your coach, gone. And it's a very lonely, lonely place to be. And I think there needs to be certainly a little bit more attention paid to, okay, this young person has been in some ways institutionalized into this sport their whole life from the age of maybe 7 up until they're 27. And we're going to just now throw them into normal society and expect them to be able to handle it. It's very different. It's very difficult because at the age of 27, your peers may have finished university if they went to university at 21 and already started their working life. Or if they didn't go to university, maybe finished college at 18 and started their working life. And so they're 6 or 7 or 8 years ahead of where you are when you effectively decide to retire and start your new life in whatever career that might be. And I think it's something we really need to look at. And, the mental health side of things is massive. It's huge. I know it's a big talking point. For me, look, I can only speak of my own experience and the experience of a young man. I found it very, very difficult to transition out of the sport of gymnastics and then find my way again and how I fit in. Fortunately enough, the positive side of the sport is that it equipped me with all the tools that I would need to do very, very well after the sport. And I think the thing that needs to take place is that conversation of, hey, let me just explain to you all of the incredible things that you learn by being a high level athlete.
Yeah.
Discipline, organization, work ethic, being able to work in a team, sacrifice, resilience. These are all things that employers or whatever work of life you go into next, they're perfect. Like you've got all the tools you need. We just need to maybe help you in that transition process and make sure you're not just left on your own, isolated like a little island. Because I felt that, I remember when I was 28, getting towards the end of my career, we were in that second lockdown that took place in the UK. It took place in November for about 1 month. And I just sat there and I was on my own in the house and I thought, what am I going to do? Nobody's coming to help me. As soon as I retire, I'm going to be left on my own. And that's exactly what happened. And luckily enough, I started to transition out of the sport before the retirement. And that made my transition a little bit easier. So I wasn't so one dimensional. A lot of athletes have an identity crisis, right? Because if you're just an athlete and that's the one thing that you are, well, when that's taken away, what are you? And for me, that I was very lucky that through circumstances of being taken off the GB team when I was 26, suffering with depression, anxiety, going into therapy, having to really deal with a lot of my demons and learn the coping mechanisms that were going to help me moving forwards and still doing gymnastics, but doing gymnastics without any expectations from sponsors, from a governing body, just doing it because I loved it. I was able to reframe my mindset and have a great experience those last 2 years, and also start to transition out of the sport before I finished. And so that day came and I retired, I already had things to do. Doesn't mean that I didn't struggle with it. I did. I found it really hard, and I still find it hard. But that transition process was just a little bit easier. So, yeah, a little bit more aftercare for athletes, particularly at that highest level. But look, let's not forget for every one athlete that gets to the top level and represents their country, there are 100 more that miss out, but still do all of that training up until the age of 18. So, what do you do with all of those people? Because they're going to go out into society and have an impact on the people around them. We've got to make sure that, the job of the sport should be to create really well-rounded individuals that can handle life after gymnastics.
Yeah. Well, kind of looking back at like your own career and maybe something that you've realized, post retirement, what's kind of something you could go back and tell yourself while you're competing that maybe you know now?
Yeah, I mean that's a big question, isn't it, mate? And what one question I get asked all the time, and I think a lot of athletes and just people in general get asked is, "Oh, would you change anything?" And for me, the answer is no, I wouldn't. So if I'm going to answer that, I have to then accept that overwhelmingly my career was a positive experience, and it was. I got to travel the world. I met some incredible people. Uh, my education came from living life and experiencing it and seeing it with my own eyes and figuring things out myself, not necessarily reading it through books at school. So I'm very, very grateful and fortunate and lucky to have the career that I've had. I think if I was to go back and speak to my younger self, do you know what? The one thing I really struggled with, mate, was self-confidence. A lot of my belief in myself came from others. I was always someone that was very self-critical. So I needed a lot of love and a lot of like positive reinforcement. You never needed to really uh, play bad cop with me because I was always going to be the baddest cop inside my head to myself. So I needed an arm around me and a bit of love because I was so competitive. So if I ever come across a young athlete that's like that, I just remind them that all you're doing is gymnastics. It's not that important. You're not saving lives. And I know that sounds strange, but you can take yourself so seriously and take this thing so seriously. And ego plays a big part in sport, right? Like you see it all the time, whether it's even between the two disciplines, countless times, and I've done it myself. I'll come across gymnasts that say, men's gymnastics is harder than women's. We have to do six apparatus. Or other sports will be like, oh, my sport's harder than your sport. It's like this weird ego thing. And actually, you're just doing cartwheels. You're not a nurse, you're not a policeman, you're not a soldier. Like, it's not that important, you know? And it is important, but it means that when you go to the gym, you put everything into it, your whole soul into it. But when you leave, it's just gymnastics, man. There are other things in life that are more important. And for me, that was the big one. And when I realized that at the end, it changed my whole experience of gymnastics. Like, I loved it. I was so grateful for it, so appreciative of it. And I wish I could have, you know, I say I wish I could have figured that out earlier, but that's just probably life. And that's just the development of a young person as they start to become a bit more mature and they have more experiences and hopefully they become a little wiser. But yeah, whenever I get the chance to speak to a young person, I try to say that, like, just don't take it too seriously. Like, it's only gymnastics. Like, and I learned that through a real big challenge in my life. Like in 2016, I missed out on the Olympic Games. And as far as I was concerned, right, I did everything that I could have done. I did all the work. I worked harder than I felt. I worked harder than anybody else. I did 8 hours of rehab a day to get back from my ankle injury. Then I went to the trials and I won the first one, came third in the second one, was top three on four of the apparatus, top four on the other two, but it still didn't work out for me. And so all of a sudden, I had a real like reality check and it was like, whoa. But what I learned from that was that, okay, gymnastics is always important, but there are a few more things that are a little bit more important in my life. And your principles, your morals, and your values, that comes before anything else. And for me, that's a real, real big thing. So yeah, it's just that. And, you know, making sure that when I'm in the gym, if a young gymnast gets an opportunity, I just tell them, just grab it, take it with both hands, because you never quite know if you're going to get another one.
Yeah.
And when you're young, right? When I went to the Olympics at 19, I'm thinking, I'm going to go to 2 or 3 Olympic Games. I'm going to win loads of medals, right? Because that's the advantage of youth, that naivety. The reality is, those opportunities don't come around very often. So if you do get a chance, you have to grab it and take it. Don't be frightened or scared of it. Just go for it.
Yeah.
And that's the most important thing because you never want to sit there and think, shoulda, woulda, coulda. What if I'd have just give it everything, give it 100%? I had a very interesting conversation once with my brother. And my brother's a really great football player. He's played at a good level and he still plays at a very good level. He's amazing, man. When I play football with him, I'm like in awe of him. But when he was I'd say when he was around 22 or 23, I had a conversation with him once and it was really interesting. And I said to him, I was like, oh, Jack, why don't you fully commit? Like, why don't you give 100%, make all the sacrifices? And I was like, is it because you're a bit frightened of it not working? He said, yeah. He was like, what if I do that and it doesn't work out? That's going to hurt a lot. So I don't fully commit because I'm protecting myself. It's self-preservation. I was like, oh, that makes so much sense. And I see so many young athletes doing that. And I just, he doesn't do that now. Like now, gosh, the way he plays, man, it's like everything. This guy is incredible. He's like my hero, my little brother. He saved my life as well, which is an incredible thing. And he's actually saved 2 people's lives. So what an amazing human being he is. But when I listened to that, I was like, that's really interesting because I see so many young athletes doing that. They don't quite commit. They're almost, they've got they're building an escape route already before they've committed because they want to feel that pain. But that's where all the best things in life are on the other side of your comfort zone, right? And you learn the most from your biggest failures. I have, and I wouldn't change them for the world. So yeah, that would be my advice for anybody out there. But yeah, hopefully that answers your question, mate.
Yeah, well, you talk about your brother, but is there, any other people kind of maybe in your gymnastics circle or outside the sport who kind of had an impact on helping you grow and helping you make those realizations?
Yeah, 100%, mate. Like, I have to say that my dad was growing up, my dad was my biggest cheerleader, my biggest fan, an incredibly intelligent guy. Uh, my dad believed in me more than I've ever seen anybody believe in anyone before. And you've got to remember, when I was a kid, we were ranked 23rd in the world in Great Britain. Nobody went to the Olympic Games. None of the senior gymnasts got paid. All of the funding was taken out of gymnastics. They had full-time jobs. So for my dream to go to the Olympics, it was a bit of an impossible dream. But 7 years later, we became the third best team on the planet. Like 7 years to climb 20 places. You think about a team doing that now. Like I don't know who is 23rd in the world, but think about that team and then imagine them in 7 years becoming the third best in the world. Just an incredible story. And my dad was my biggest supporter, and he kept me in the sport. He helped us financially support a family, and I'll always, always be grateful for him for that. It taught me a lot about being a dad now. I'm a dad now, and I try to model myself a lot off my father. And then my coach, what a man! One of the best gymnastics coaches in the world. If you ever get a chance to come across him, he'll be at the Worlds with the Irish team.
Okay.
His name's Sergei Stojanov. Oh, anybody that meets him, he's like. There are not many people like him that you'll ever meet. He's like a combination of Master Yoda, Rafiki out of The Lion King, and Master Splinter out of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. He just speaks in riddles, but the guy, I've never met anyone that loves gymnastics as much as him. And he taught me how to be a great gymnast, but he taught me how to be a great man. And what an incredible human being he is. Just a legend. He's given me everything in my life, all of my life now, from my gymnastics career and what I did in the Olympic Games. And that was his dream, you know. It was his dream to go to the Olympics. So I'm sure for him it was an incredible honor to have coached an athlete that made it to that Olympic Games. And he was a big part of that resurgence of gymnastics in Great Britain. And so he was an absolute hero. And if you get the chance to meet him, mate, make sure, Sergey, I chatted to Sam. He's a great guy. He told me I should shake your hand because he's just an absolute legend. And everybody in the world of gymnastics loves him because whether he's teaching somebody to do a forward roll or a Cassina on high bar, he probably gets more joy from the forward roll than the Cassina. Like, he's just the most enthusiasm. He makes you feel like you can do anything. Just the coolest guy in the world. So they're my two biggest inspirations. And then purely from a gymnastics standpoint, I'd say my biggest influence on my career would have been Alexei Nemov. Uh, I think for my generation, his style of gymnastics was just, and this guy is right, a lot taller, 5'10", beautiful lines. Just, whoa, I mean, there's a video for anybody out there that's a big gymnastics fan. Go and watch the 1996 preparation for the Atlanta Olympic Games. Alexei Nemov's routines from Round Lake in Russia. It's like one of the best videos you'll ever watch. It's just perfection. So that influenced a lot of my gymnastics. And then also the Japanese. I was very lucky when I was a kid. My coach, Sergey, one of his best friends was Nikolai Andrianov, who is one of the greatest Olympians of all time, won 15 Olympic medals. And he's from the same gymnastics club as my coach, Sergey. And he was in Japan and he was Naoya Sukahara's coach. So think how lucky I was to grow up with all these people influencing my career. And every Christmas, Andrianov would bring back a VHS tape of Sukahara's training, give it to my coach when they met up in Russia for Christmas, and he'd bring it back and I'd study the tape. So I studied Japanese gymnastics. So my gymnastics, I'd describe it as an influence of Russian gymnastics, Japanese gymnastics, and then that British style that you see.